Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to the Simply Strategic Ministry Podcast. I'm excited to jump in today. Man, we love helping church leaders grow their ministries through simple strategies and scalable systems. So we love thinking about theology and we love thinking about philosophy, but this podcast is designed to really help you with a lot of more of the practical side of ministry. So we like to say, hey, at SSM, welcome to the practical side of ministry, and we hope today is going to help you in practical ways, no matter what your theology or your philosophy is in church ministry. But we think today is going to be really, really helpful. I'm excited about our guest today. His name is Noah Herrin. Noah is he is a voice for this generation. And you've probably seen his content on social media. He's produced a great new book called Holy Habits, and he's also planting a church in Nashville, Tennessee. So I'm a Knoxville guy. I'm planting a church in Knoxville, Tennessee at the time of this recording. So I'm excited to jump into a conversation that I'm honestly just like really curious about. I'm excited to see how Way Church has started, his church, and learn from him as well. But, as always, man, we are trying to bring just incredible content to you and trying to get guests that are really going to help you. But one thing we can always ask of you guys is that if you're watching on YouTube, if you would subscribe and hit that bell. If you're listening on Spotify, to like and follow us and leave a comment, leave a review, do a rating, do whatever it takes, share on social media. Just help us get the word out because we're investing a lot of time and resources to help you, a church leader, grow your ministry through simple strategies and scalable systems. So I'm excited to jump into today's conversation with Noah Herrin. All right, what's up, Noah? How are you today, man?
Doing great. Pumped to be here.
Dude, thank you so much. I'm excited, dude. I've been I've really, I've seen you on social media for a long time, and I, of course, have been following the journey as a fellow Tennessee church planter. As you're planting in Nashville, I'm in Knoxville, which feels like worlds away. Nashville and Knoxville are completely different. But I'm excited. I'm really excited you're planting in Tennessee. Our state needs more churches, so I'm excited about that. But man, I've been following. We have a mutual friend. I know you've spoken for my friend JJ Lane up in somewhere in the Midwest, Kansas or Missouri or something like that. I've really been following closely. He said you did. He said he did. You did a great job speaking to his students and so. But dude, thank you for being here.
Honored, man. I'm so excited for this combo.
So what's new with you? So you are how many months into planning a church now?
We just hit 4 months. So we're 4 months in. We officially launched in September of 2023. And we spent about 9 months prior to that building towards launch. So the journey started a lot longer ago than 4 months, but we've had the doors open for 4 months.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. So you are you had a 9-month pre-launch, and we'll get a little more into the church planning specifics, but just to kind of give people a little bit of your story. When did you know you wanted to plant a church?
I was leading a college ministry at 20 years old that started in my apartment in college. And over the course of about a year, it grew to 400 or 500 college students. And I was kind of learning on the fly. I was having fun. It was chaos, had no training really. But I had a really great mentor who was a church planter. And I just could not wrap my mind around what that meant, why you would want to do it, any of those things. And we just had this really long conversation one day where I was just asking him questions about what his day looked like and why they did it and all these different things. And his eyes were just you could just tell there was just this crazy passion in his eyes. And he said this statement. He said, church planters are kind of like the Navy SEALs of the kingdom of God. He said, you got to be a little bit crazy to go through with it. And something that day at that Starbucks just lit up inside of me. And I was like, man, I want to do that. Like, I want to go all in. I want to start from scratch. And really, like, my experience with our college ministry, it wasn't planting a church. It's not the same. But it was similar in some regards in that we had to start from nothing. We had to build a team. We had to develop culture. We had to reach lost people if we wanted to grow. And
Yeah.
I just think that's how God wired me. And church planting is always, it's always seemed like something that would cause my faith to stretch the most.
Yeah.
And so I've been praying about it since I was 21 years old.
Oh wow! So we have a little bit of similar stories. Just from I started in youth ministry when I was 20 years old as well, and we're both right around the same age.
Yeah.
And so we saw a lot of that growth and that explosion from 100 students to 500, and it was just like it was like, for me, at least me personally, it was like the most fun burnout I ever had. And so, but like through that period, because I knew I was called to plant a church too, like there were so many times that I would like almost like took the step to do it. Did you
Yeah.
have to like fight yourself, like hold yourself back like 3 or 4 times in the 9-year process?
Oh, for sure, man. I called ARC, the church planting organization, when I
Yeah.
was 21 years old, and I was like, I think I'm ready. And they were like, you're not. They were like, you have too much debt. You're too young. You don't,
Yes.
you're not married. You don't know what you're asking for right now. And
I know.
they did it in the kindest way possible. I absolutely love ARC. I'm so grateful for that phone call. I tell the story a lot, but I called them. I was serious. I thought I was ready to start a church. I was super naive and immature, and they were very gracious and helped me see that I wasn't quite ready, and they helped me get ready over the course of the next 8 years or so.
Yeah, and those like holding yourself back and having people like that in your life are good, because there's this whole other group of people, and I bet you experienced it too, who are like, you're the next Stephen Furtick. You gotta go do it. You're the best preacher we've ever heard. And it's like I know you experienced that. What do you feel like that does to a young leader?
I think the easy side of it is it's obviously there are more negatives that can come from that than good.
Yeah.
I was I never struggled for confidence. I always felt like if I felt like God told me to do it, I'm just wired to go do it. Like I'm a doer. I like to build, and so I never like struggled with confidence. But I do think when I was younger, just because of the way that I got into ministry, I was very insecure about whether or not what I was saying from the pulpit was resonating with people. I felt like I was connecting, and I felt like there was just something that happened when I would speak that felt like I was doing what I was made to do, but I'd never done it before, and I had no training when I started. And so sometimes those comments, however you want to say it, they helped kind of give me some momentum to some affirmation that I wasn't really getting from anywhere else, to just be like, maybe I am like called to this, and people are, being encouraged by this. Now over time, I think that that's a really scary thing, to get too much of that. And thankfully I had some wise counsel in my life that, would humble me some.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. So, you young adult ministry, you sounds like you grew up in a really healthy church, which is awesome. And then you kind of had like this. So just again, for those who may not be super familiar with your story, you kind of had like, I know you probably would never call yourself this, but like, you're a Christian influencer now, I know that's probably like the cringiest thing to say vocally out loud, but I mean, you steward a lot of influence, especially with Gen Z. And how did that happen? Like, how did you go from a guy who's starting a college ministry to a guy who has thousands and thousands of followers, who speaks all over the nation, maybe even the world, and is planning something that by all, by looking on the outside, we've never had a real conversation outside of this. It looks like God's really blessing it. What did that journey look like for you?
Man, I was into photography and videography and stuff before I got into ministry, and so I had a small platform from that world. I used to do some work with different clothing brands and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
that platform was, it was not a Christian
Yeah.
platform. It was just a kind of creative platform of a few
Yeah.
thousand people. And when I started preaching and sharing the gospel online, I actually lost most of those followers. And I remember like really wrestling with that because I was finding a lot of identity in, the
Yeah.
small platform that I did have. Long story
Hmm.
short, I think that the just very practically speaking, I think the influence, a lot of it in the early days came from that college ministry because
Yeah.
I wasn't focused on growing anything online. I was really focused on building that college ministry. I wanted to reach college students, and I wanted to do it because I gave my life to Jesus when I was in college. And so I
Yeah.
had this like real burden to help try to save people that were struggling the same way that I was.
Yeah.
Um, and that was the only motivation. It was just like, how can we reach more college students and how can I get better at communicating so that I
Yeah.
can reach more college students? And,
Yeah.
God blessed it and we grew quickly. And I think from that growth, because there weren't any college ministries in our area that were doing what we were doing, there just became this natural kind of interest from other ministries and pastors. We started posting a podcast. This was back in
Okay.
end of 2016, early
Okay.
2017. This was before churches were posting podcasts. Like
Yeah.
legitimately, like I'm not trying to be that I did it before anyone else guy.
Yeah.
Like there were definitely other people who were, but there were very few churches
Yeah.
that were posting weekly podcasts, let alone college ministries.
Yeah.
And so
Hmm.
we just occupied a space on the internet that nobody was really occupying, and our podcast was getting over 10,000 views a week for that college ministry. And I really do
Cool.
think it was just because there weren't college ministries on the internet. So
Yeah.
that kind of, over the course of a couple years, that grew some influence. And then, I'm very cognizant of the fact that Instagram could be broke tomorrow,
Yeah.
or God could just decide the influence is gone, and so I hold it really
Hmm.
loosely. But yeah, I'm trying to steward it well. I post regularly online. I'm always trying to be helpful and not inspirational. I think when you try to be inspirational or you try to post stuff that people like, you become a slave to the platform. But if you just try
Yeah.
to be helpful, then you can become a slave to what God's calling you to do. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's so good, man. And I want to dive into a little bit here in a moment. There's three main pieces that I do want to dive into today. One is your book, Holy Habits, which I love. Any literature on habits, I am consuming. I love
I
that
love it.
stuff. I geek out on it. And then I want to get into your content creation process and just how you write resonating content.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is I do want to get into a little more details around the church that you're leading. And like I said, we really we geek out on like the system side of things.
Yeah.
Like we talk about simple scalable systems. Like that's what it means to be a strategic ministry for us. And so we do want to get into that practical, but as you were thinking about like you said something that I really like. You talked about how you weren't trying to gain influence on social media. You were building something.
Hmm.
And I find it so weird today that there is like this generation of content creators,
Yeah.
specifically church content creators, who have built nothing. Like they have no group of people. Like what you were doing is you were creating content out of the overflow of your ministry with people, is what it seems like.
Yeah.
And I just find that like in this world, like you were like content creators today is like a thing. Like
Yeah.
that wasn't a thing when you and I were 22, 23 years old. It was just like, oh, there's a guy with a YouTube and nobody watches it, and it's the weird guy.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's where you went and got conspiracy theories. And so, you were creating content before any of that. And, I just find that really good, because our job as pastors is to people first.
Yeah.
And we can be slave to an algorithm. We can be enslaved to just doing whatever gets likes. But if you focus on the people, you're always going to have a platform, because as you focus on people, it's going to help people. And I love that, man. So tell me a little bit about your book.
Yeah.
Holy Habits. I've dove into a little bit of it. I'd be lying to you if I've already read it cover to cover. So I don't want to lie to you today, but I have followed along with it for a while, and I love what you're doing. So habits by one of my favorite books is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I know you've probably consumed that multiple times. One of his main things is that you don't rise to the level of your goals, but you fall to the level of your systems.
Yep.
And habits and creating habits are just simple systems that you put in your life wherever you go.
Totally.
And so tell me why you felt like this was the moment to write this specific book for the generation that you're speaking to.
Yeah, I was thinking about what was the book that I needed 5 years ago. That's kind of what I was thinking through. And, when I first started following Jesus, I felt like I was set free immediately from all the sin that was in my life. I felt like, I'm not, I just gave my life to Jesus. I'm not going to struggle with any of this stuff that I was struggling with before. And I did not struggle for like 2 or 3 days. And then I started struggling again. And there was just this first year or so of just feeling close to God on some days and far from God on other days. And it was really discouraging to me as a young believer, feeling like I was either doing something wrong or, maybe God wasn't real. I just was wrestling with why do I read about freedom but not experience freedom? All that to say, as I was traveling and preaching the last few years, I noticed that same kind of burden on young people and not just young people, but a lot of times, people in their 20s and 30s, just frustrated with where we're at with the Lord. And I came to this conclusion that an encounter with Jesus will set you free, but it's your habits with Jesus that keep you free. And I think that when you read Scripture, particularly when you look at the words of Jesus and when you look at the words of Paul and the other New Testament writers, you've got to establish more habits of the Spirit than you have habits of the flesh, or you stand no chance against sin. And so following Jesus is absolutely an inward transformation. That is 100% a fact. However, we cannot sit around and not have actions that back up our desire to be transformed and expect to be transformed. Something that I just talked about at our church this past week is information without application does not lead to transformation. And so I really feel like young people, young Christians understand better than ever that Jesus loves them. But what I felt like young people needed to understand was that Jesus loves you. But just like any other relationship, your relationship with Jesus requires effort. It deserves effort. And habits, particularly holy habits, are how we put forth effort into our relationship with Jesus.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So when, as I've been going through your book here, one of the things that I love, one of the pieces, because you basically break it down. You break it down into 10 different habits, and I love the idea of celebrating everything. I'm not going to get into it today, but I'm like, yes, we need to feast, brother. I was just talking to him before, next time I come to Nashville, we're going to go get a really good steak, and I'm going to buy it. We're going to celebrate Way Church and what God's doing. But a few things that really resonate with me, is I love the idea of keeping it simple. When you keep it simple, and you talk about it in multiple different areas. You talk about keeping it simple in relationships and money, and you're just kind of extrapolating that idea into the different areas of our life. Remember, as you're speaking to Christian leaders, and as you're speaking, our audience our audience specifically is mostly like people my age and a little bit younger and a little bit older. So right around somewhere in the 25 to 35, somewhere in that window there, give it take a few years. There is this, the world is just getting so much more complicated, especially for those of us who like in this world where we've kind of had to, like, especially millennials, we're on the younger side of millennials. Like there was this growing up that, they kind of kept us from growing up, like we really struggled to grow up. And then like we get out of college and life just kind of hits people in the face. You get that whole adulting, I'm having to adulting now. And then you look at that and you take a housing market that is absolutely nuts. You look at, there's a lot of unhealth in the church in a lot of places. And so life just got really complicated, especially for leaders our age in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Post-COVID, what are some areas that you feel like simplicity should be fought for? What are some areas that specifically for the youth pastor or the church leader, what do you feel like are some areas that we probably need to fight a little bit harder for?
I mean, I don't mean to be dramatic, but I think simplicity should be fought for in every area of life. I think simplicity leads to clarity, and clarity in every area of your life. It leads to purpose. It leads to effectiveness. It leads to, I'm a big believer in long-term thinking and reverse engineering that thinking.
Okay.
Tell me more about that. What do I want to, what's the most important thing for me to accomplish, in the next year or in the next 3 years? And then just reversing that and going, okay, well, what would I have to do if I have this goal for a year from now, what would I have to do every day for the next 365 days for that to happen? I mean, I'm huge on that. And I think January is an exciting time for people because we write down goals, and there's actually studies that have been done on the psychology of writing down goals, and the things that happen in your brain when you write down goals. It's almost like you are releasing dopamine in your brain that is as if you already accomplished the goal by writing it down. But that's not actually how it works. And so I want to set goals that I am pushed and challenged to accomplish, but I want to achieve them. And so anyways, simplicity allows you to focus on the right things. And so removing the distractions. I mean, there's a guy named Richard Foster, one of my favorite authors ever, wrote the book Celebration of Discipline, which really in a lot of ways inspired my book Holy Habits. And he talks about how the great need of our current age is not for more talented people, but deeper people. Okay. And then he makes the argument that the way to go deep is to simplify your life. And I think that's so true. We have so many people who they want to do everything, and when you try to do everything, you get nothing done. Yeah. And so, right now, just to give a practical example of this, is like the things that I care the most about right now, other than my relationship with God, are my family, the church that we started, and the traveling ministry that God has given us in this season of my life. And so if it doesn't fit in one of those three buckets, it's probably not happening. Outside of exercise and friendship, there's not much more room on the plate. And if I try to add anything else to the plate, it's probably going to be done really poorly.
Yeah, that's good. I don't know, I used to, I teach martial arts, and so I traveled all around the country competing professionally in karate. And we always go back to the martial arts world, and I also studied jiu-jitsu as well. We always go back to the martial arts world is that, almost every fight you fight, and anytime you knock somebody out, it's either with a jab, cross, hook, or an uppercut.
Okay.
Those are the 4 boxing techniques you learn when you begin.
Wow.
And it's just that simplicity. Yeah. And I think that is so, I think it's so important of just like, how do we continually simplify our lives over and over and over and over again? But that does bring up a great question because, you have scaled your life too. You're speaking at more events than you did 5 years ago, I'm sure. You're probably preaching more. You're probably leading at a higher level than you were ever before. Like, your capacity is growing, but your simplicity is also growing as well. Would you say that that is did that come naturally to you, or did you have in order to keep it simple, to have that habit of simplicity, was that like a fight, or was it like, okay, this makes sense?
Oh man, such a fight, because what happens is, you get a little bit more opportunity, and whatever lane of opportunity you're desiring it, as a listener to this podcast, you get a little bit more. And then what happens is that does not satisfy your soul the way that you think it's going to. You want more. And so then with the more opportunity comes more opportunities to add new things to your plate, to add a podcast, to start a YouTube channel, to what you fill in the blank. And that definitely came with that over time. Something that I've learned from that is that saying no takes more faith than saying yes.
Dude.
And I have seen that be true so many different times. Something like a really great thing could come up, an opportunity that feels amazing, and it comes up and it's like, okay, if I say yes to this is going to be great. Maybe it leads to financial benefits. Maybe it leads to X, Y, or Z. But is this going to sacrifice from the things that I say are most important? And if it is, I've got to take the step of faith and say no, believing that this is going to protect my yes. And so that's kind of where we're at. It doesn't make it any easier sometimes, but I'm fighting harder than ever to say no more often so I can say yes to the right things.
Yeah, that's good. I'm really glad you said that. This past week I had for several different reasons, there was a speaking engagement that I ended up turning down, that I really wanted to do it, but just didn't feel right in my spirit. And I'd spoken to a few people just about it, and they kind of confirmed that. And I was like, all right, this is going to be kind of a loss. It was going to be a great opportunity for our family and also just for our ministry. And I was like, all right, I'm going to step out and fail on this. And the next 30 minutes, somebody called and wanted to have a camp the same week. And it's like, It's just wild how when you step out, and I think church planting and raising kids, it's just, we have to continually do that.
Totally.
Absolutely. It becomes this, we are simplifying and we are giving up other things, and we are saying, Lord, use what we have here. And
absolutely.
It's just, he keeps multiplying it, and he's multiplying it in your life. Another piece of your book that I love is, as somebody who runs a coaching company, a coaching ministry for people, is you talk about find a coach and be a coach.
Yeah.
Why are those two things connected to you? Because a lot of people are like, I need coaching, I can't coach.
Yeah, I think we're all called to make disciples. That's really what I get at in the book is I use the coaching illustration. I share a story about Reggie Wayne, who was
I read that.
Hall of Fame.
I was a big Reggie Wayne fan back with my boy Peyton Manning up at the Colts.
Man, they were iconic to watch. Marvin Harrison, I mean, they were so good. But Reggie Wayne was known for working really hard in preseason training camp, and he had this saying. He would tell his coaches, "Coach me like a rookie," and I just love that because it produced something in Reggie that probably wouldn't have been there at the level that it was had he not allowed someone to coach him like that. And so in the book, I just break it down like, we're not just called to make disciples, we're called to be discipled. And so you need someone who's challenging you, who you've given access to in your life to truly coach you, to truly disciple you. But you're not actually obeying the Lord if you're not also making disciples and coaching other people.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the connection is I think you should always be being discipled and making disciples at the same time in every season of our life.
Yeah, I love that. because that's ultimately our mission at Local Church Knoxville is to help people love God and make disciples in their local communities. And, I just keep boiling it back down to like the two things that you are called to do as a human is to love God and make disciples. Mm-hmm. Like, I guess you're loving God and loving others, and the best way you can love others is to help others. And I feel like, I've been having a little bit of a talk with a few other leaders just around like this idea of, has rest become an idol for people? Yeah. And I don't want to get into that conversation. I'll save that one for another day because that one can get a little tense quick. But, that idea of like, we are all called to make disciples. And if we don't have a habit of making disciples, like there's no like in between. It's not like I'm in a season of not making disciples. It's like, no, you're called to become a disciple and to make disciples. It's going to look different in each season. If you're a mama and you got 4 little kids running around, or you got 3 crazy kids like my wife does, like it's going to look a little different in each season. Totally. But you got to have it. And I'm really glad you did that. And so to kind of change gears just a little bit. So when it comes to, you've written a book. Congratulations, by the way.
Thanks.
Dude, you've written a book. That's this is your first like official book, right? Or how many other have you done?
I self-published one before this one, but
I thought you had some other resources out there, but I wasn't familiar with them.
This one felt different than the first one, for sure.
Okay, good. Well, congratulations, man. That's a huge accomplishment. I'm so glad you've done that. But that, I'm sure, how long did it take you to write?
About 3 months of consistent work.
So, all right. So here's where I'm going to geek out on the process side of things. When you say consistent work, what's that looking like for you?
Yeah, every day, Monday through Thursday, for about 3 months, I spent the first 2.5 hours of the day writing.
Really?
And
wow,
I didn't.
Good for you, bro.
So I'm a pretty like when I set my mind to something, I'm gonna do it. And so I'm a morning person. I wake up almost every day at 5 a.m. and I just work best in the morning. So my kids weren't up. My wife wasn't up at that time either. Wake up, make a pour over coffee, and sit down and just write. And some days I wrote, a sentence that was used, and other days I wrote a whole chapter, literally. But that got me. It forced me to do the work. I've just found if you show up consistently, you're going to see results. Yeah. Not always at the speed that you want them, but you will see results. And so 3 months of doing that, had a great editor and agent and just people who were constantly giving me feedback over that time. And 3 months later, it was done.
Dude, let's go. That's awesome. So, I mean, do you, one of the guys that I would love to have on our podcast one day, I don't know if you've ever heard of him. His name is Tiago Forte. And he talks about building a second brain. Yep. And I've gone deep into his stuff. And his is basically giving you a process for how do you capture content, how do you connect it to other pieces of ideas, and then how do you ultimately create content. Do you have a process because, I mean, you're traveling and speaking, you're planting a church, you're a dad, and you're doing those things at a high, like you're not, like those are not like side hustles for you. Like these are like high capacity roles. What's been your process for like bringing all that to life as opposed we can all there's so much more than just sitting down and writing. How have you aggregated all that together?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super familiar with Tiago Forte's work. I actually use a software that he at least used to use it. I don't know if he does anymore, but called Notion.
That's what I use. It's so good.
Anytime I have any thought that I think is going to be useful, literally for anything, I put it in Notion. I have this whole kind of system in there where it gets stored, and then whenever I'm trying to write something on comparison or whatever, I can go in and look and see what I have on that subject. And so that's been, super helpful. I think for me, I think best in the mornings, but I also think best on the move. And so something like when I'm stuck, if I'm writing or if I'm trying to solve a problem with our church, I'll take like one problem with me on a run and just go for a 3 5 mile run and just think, I'm going to just think about this problem for 3 to 5 miles. And
Yeah.
man, the amount of solutions that I've come up with on a run, I think there's something about being outside and having your body moving that helps. But that's kind of what my process looks like is I'll go
Yeah.
to Notion, go to my notes, and if I get stuck, I go outside.
Well, I recently changed over from Evernote to Notion,
Okay.
and simply because of the cost. But then I got into Notion, and I was like, "Holy smokes, it's so easy to write in this thing, and it's
Yeah.
so easy to connect ideas."
Yeah.
And I think like people think, "Oh, I can never write a book, or I can never produce content." But like once you kind of get things down into a simple system that works for you,
Yep.
like things start to connect, and like those
Absolutely.
wheels start turning.
Totally.
And you're not only producing content, like you've obviously produced a book, which is a great which is a huge thing, but you're also producing weekly sermon content, and if the Lord's putting a new heart or message in your heart for an event or anything like that. But you're also like your grind on content creation on social media is extremely consistent. It's extremely compelling. And I know we could talk about like how do you connect with people, but like from a how are you taking all of that information in and then getting that out to the masses in a consistent way that keeps a high level of also good quality content.
Yeah.
How are you doing that? Because every youth pastor I talk to is trying to, they're trying to figure out, like we're a bunch of millennial youth pastors. We're still trying to figure out TikTok for a lot of
Yeah.
them and how that actually works. And then a lot of people are still, they're running a social media account for their student ministry or their church.
Yeah.
And, like how are you getting all of that in such quality ways? And maybe you got somebody now who's running it for you, but maybe even before that, like how are you doing that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to our conversation around simplifying. I realized I'm putting all this effort into a weekly sermon that I'm writing.
Yeah.
And when I was trying to write a sermon and then write content and then write a book and then, all these different, it was just like, I'm dying. Like I felt like I could not do it. Like I don't know how people are doing all that. And so my life changed so much for the better when I said, I am going to focus on the most important thing, which to me was the
Yes.
sermon, and
Yes.
saying, I am going to write the best 30 to 35-minute sermon that I can write. The content is going to be good. And then when I'm at the end of the week and the content is done, I can take content from that sermon and use it in every other way that I want to use. Because if it is good enough for the 400 people at Way Church, then it is good enough for the people who are online. And if it's not, it doesn't need to be in the sermon.
Yes.
So, I really want, I think this is something that I just feel personally challenged by. I want someone who interacts with me online to get a similar experience personality wise as they're getting with me in person. And
Mhm.
so it also helps with some of that just kind of being the same online and offline. It's like,
Yep.
hey, like I'm going to use content that like I talk about in person, and if it's not something I wouldn't talk about in person, I'm not going to talk about it online. And so I literally go through my sermon every week. I send the parts of the sermon to our creative team that I want them to record and, slice up for social media. I take stuff from sermons that I preached a year ago and turn it into social media content. I mean, it's just, it is a constant source of content, and all I have to do is focus on writing one long piece of content, and I've got, content for days.
Well, that, outside of developing people, which, we're preachers are content creators. Like
Yeah,
we're good at that stuff. If we're not, we're probably not in ministry, or at least we're not on the stage in ministry.
totally.
And I love that because, I used to do this for somebody where I would take and try to turn a pastor's content into different pieces. And when you really look at it, I mean, you can write 3 or 4 blogs out of it. You can get all kinds of carousel posts. I mean, it's just set up for it, but you got to be strategic.
Yeah.
And are you like in your sermon prep? I know we're getting the details when we're hitting up right here at the end. But when you're sermon prepping, are you going through and are you thinking about, hey, because, let me go ahead and make a disclaimer here. Some people might say, you only need to think about the people in the room. And I think we just live in a different world to where this sermon's going to last way longer than the guy who put it out and didn't even have a podcast 15 years ago. I mean, you're talking about, are you thinking about writing sermons? Are you highlighting? Are you doing anything? Are you creating call outs in Notion of like, hey, this is going to be something I'll like or is that done? Like I preach the message and I'm going back through it.
Yeah, I do kind of pre-emphasize things. I mean, when I send my notes out on Thursday to our creative team, there are things that are specifically highlighted that I feel like, hey, this is going to be the part of the message that I think is going to really resonate and be helpful to people online. So let's make sure we have an extra camera recording, an extra angle, stuff like that. But with all that being said, I preach multiple times a Sunday. And there are some times that what I think is going to be the moment in the message that the Holy Spirit moves, the Holy Spirit doesn't move, during that part. I mean, that happens a lot. And so when that happens, it's really simple. It's like, hey guys, next service, scrap what I told you to record. Let's record this part because I really feel like God's doing something in that moment. And I think like, the other thing is, if you are a pastor and you're wrestling with like, do I write the sermon for the people online or do I write it for the people in the room? I would say they're the same person because the people that's in the room are also the same people. Everyone's online. I mean, like to some degree, people are online in 2024. And so I'm writing this sermon for both of them. And my goal is to be helpful. And I think if you make your goal, like number one, preach the Bible, like don't preach something else. But then number two, like try to make your content as helpful as possible. People are going to enjoy your message better because they enjoy things that help them. And secondly, your content will probably reach more people as a byproduct of that because if it's helpful to them, they're going to want it to be helpful to their friends. And that's how it gets out. That's just kind of some of my thought process with that.
And I love it. You're going back to what you said about young adult ministry is you didn't create a platform to create a platform. You built up people. And when you build up people, that content that's building them up is naturally going to live beyond the room. Yeah. And I just love that, man, because I just think we have a generation of content creators that don't know how to be people builders, that don't know how to be disciple makers. Yeah. Like our job is not content creation. Our job is evangelism. Our job is discipleship. Yeah. Do those things well first and let whatever God wants to happen. And you're just a product of that, man. So I just want to just applaud your faithfulness. I know that there are many guys who started, because we started in ministry the same year. I know there are many guys in ministry who started with us who are not in ministry anymore. Mm-hmm. And we can look around and see how the enemy's picked some guys off, and you've stuck with it, and you've written content, and you're planning a church, and so just to end this today, we're at the end of our time, and just to end this, tell me just really quickly, what has been one of the just key ingredients of like, hey, we had a great launch of our church, of Way Church, and that really helped us launch well. And then what is one thing that you might rethink again if you had to back up 6 months? So just give me those two quick hitters, and then I want to hear about how people can get your book and stuff like that to close us up.
I think as a church planter, I'm going to start with the thing that I would redo. As a church planter, you have to think about money, and you are naturally stressed about the lack of money. If I could redo it, I would urge myself to stop thinking so much about where the money's going to come from and spend more time focusing on what I would do with the money when it comes.
I like
because God.
All right, hold up, because I've and talked through this. All right, say that again, because I do think that's something that people need to hear.
Yeah, I think if I was to restart planting Way Church, I would tell myself, think about money less and think about more what you would do with the money when God brings it. Because I'm a firm believer that if God told you to do something and you have a plan for what you're going to do when God answers your prayer, God will answer your prayer. But if you're not prepared for God blessing you, if you're not prepared for God answering your prayer, if God does bless you anyways, you're going to be a poor steward of it. And I think I had some plans, but I wasn't fully ready. And God opened up the faucet, and people started giving that we didn't even know, and all of our needs were covered. And I spent all this time stressing about something that God was clearly not stressing about. And I wish I would have put the same effort in those early months of going, okay, if God were to blow our socks off, what would we do? Let's put a plan in place. Like, let's get ready for rain, so to speak.
Man, that's so good. And that's honestly, like, I feel you. Like, I'm in that same boat, and I'm like, okay, I've never raised this much money in my life.
Yeah.
I've never seen this much money in my life. And now I'm just expecting it to, and it's just wild how God just shows up. It's so cool. What's one thing that you feel like church planners should do that you've done?
We wanted to plant a church for a lot of different reasons. One of the reasons we wanted to do it is because we wanted to do life with people, and we wanted to find and to help build a community that we wanted to be a part of. And so we went really, really deep with a group of people that we're now asking a lot out of. And I'm talking particularly with the core leaders of the different areas of our ministry. We spent months getting to know them around dinner tables, date nights, those types of things. And then we spent months talking through our vision, answering questions, praying with one another, fasting with one another. And those people have become not just close friends, but family. And now when we're asking them to sacrifice sometimes 12 hours on a Sunday for setup, 3 services, we're about to switch to 3 services, tear down, on their off day, they're doing it because they have just as much skin in the game as we do. They care about the vision just as much as we do. They see our church as a family just as much as we do. And I think a lot of church planters will run into people on their team being burnt out. And we're not excluded from that. Yeah. I'm not saying that we are. There are definitely people on our team who probably are a little tired from the pace that we've been running at. But I will say that our core leaders, there's unity, there is endurance, there's a we can do this because God's with us attitude. And I think that's because we all committed together from the beginning that we're not going to be a church that does church on Sunday. We're going to be a church that does life together all throughout the week. And so when we ask something of each other, we're not asking something from a blank deposit box. We've deposited into each other, and there's stuff there that we can pull out. So
yeah, that's so good. That's so good. Well, man, I hope God continues to bless your church. Like I said, I'm so grateful for more churches being planted in Tennessee. Yeah. Man, it's so good. So tell us just where everybody can connect with you. Tell them, where's your book, and just give us one last call to action here.
Yeah, Holy Habits. It's on Amazon. You can just search my name, Noah Herrin, and I'm on Instagram the most out of all the social medias. Just Noah Herrin. Dude, honored to be on here. Thank you for having me, Landon.
And you're still traveling and speaking for youth ministries and churches, correct?
I am. Yeah, I'm doing it. A little less than I was pre-church, but we're definitely still doing it and loving it.
So I know everybody should go, and if you're looking for a great speaker for a night, or go book my man. I know he would be very happy about that. And all my youth pastor friends out there. But dude, thank you so much. Praise God for your faithfulness, and thank you guys for listening today. We hope today's conversation, as we've really dove into the practical piece, as we've dove into content creation and church planting and running social media in today's world. We really hope that today's conversation has helped you grow your ministry through simple strategies and scalable systems. So thank you so much for listening.